Hi there, readers and teachers. I'm Miss Fideli, and I'm going to talk to you today about Chapter 4 of To Kill a Mockingbird. Chapter 4 starts out with Scout basically discussing the rest of the school year, how she finds it boring and she is not impressed, and her and Miss Caroline just tolerate each other throughout the rest of the year. Jim calls it the Dewey Decimal System, a new way of teaching in the younger grades at this time period. Of course, we know what the Dewey Decimal System is. We know that it's in the way that we catalog and organize the library and books in the library. But at the time, it was a term used to describe new methods of teaching and new ways of teaching. But it can kind of reminds me of today's the new math. A lot of people refer to, oh, my kids are learning the new ways of math. And so it's kind of like the same thing. Anyway, she goes on and she talks about how she feels like she's being cheated out of something. I think her education and not being able to learn the way she wants to or the way that she needs to. And then she describes how on her way home from school with Jim, they pass two live oaks and they're at the edge of the Radley lot by the house, and they spot two pieces of chewing gum minus the wrappers. So no wrappers, chewed chewing gum, and to me that sounds gross. But Scout's first impulse or first reaction is to get it into her mouth as fast as she can. And so she does this. And Jim is appalled. He is so upset. He says that you're going to die. You can't put chewed chewing gum in your mouth. And when she realizes that she didn't die and she's okay, she was happy that she did it, because chewing gum is a delicacy at this time period. It is the Great Depression, and they're really hard to come by, and Atticus, their father, is not going to be spending money on chewing gum. So, of course, Scout wants to eat it. And a few days later, or maybe a few weeks later, they go by the same spot in the tree. They find this knot hole, and they find something else shiny, and it's a box, and it's like a jewelry box, and it has two Indian head pennies, which are really old and really shiny. And so then they realize that this is somebody's hiding spot. And so then they talk about, is it ethically okay to take them? Should they leave them? You know, maybe it's their friend Cecil Jacobs, who lived at the end of the street. But then they find out that it's not Cecil's, and they decide to hold on to the two Indian head pennies until they decide what they're going to do. But they really do realize that they are somebody's, and they talk about what the right thing would be to do is to give them back to them. And then summer goes on, and Dill comes back for the summer, and they hang out with him, and they decide that they're going to continue to play their Boo Radley game, where they divvy out parts and they decide to play the old legend or the myth of what happened to Boo Radley. And they go on and they talk about who their role was. Of course, Scout is going to be Mrs. Radley, which is, you know, women's duties and kind of the sexist roles in the book that are shown to us. She had to sweep and mop the porch, and Dill gets to be Mr. Radley, and he gets to walk and down, up and down the sidewalk and cough when Jim speaks to him, and Jim naturally was Boo. He gets to go under the front steps, and he would shriek and howl and act like a ghost and come out, and he would stab his dad in the leg with some scissors. And so as summer went on, their game went on, and they continued to refine it and make it really good and everything. And then one day, they started talking about going up to the house to get a peek in the door to try to see Boo again. And so this hasn't happened until the summer before, when they had Jim slap the house and go up and touch the house and run back. Remember, they saw a tiny flicker, and so this time they're like, oh, let's just see if we can get him to come out. Let's go peek inside. Maybe we'll take a fishing pole and we'll drop him a note or something and see if he'll come out. Just tell him to come out. We'll be nice about it. We want to see what's going on. And then finally, Scout and Jim were talking, and Jim said, Scout, quit being a girl. Why don't you get in this tire and I'll push you down the hill and you can have a good time. So she gets in the tire, and Jim gives her a push. And she rolls down the street, and when the tire comes to the end, it goes in through the Radley gate to the front door, and it hits the porch, and that's when Scout pops out. And then she realizes when she gets out that she is in the Radley yard, and Jim and Dill are yelling at her, telling her to get out of there. And the last thing she does is, when she gets up, her head is shaking, and she hears another sound, and it comes from inside the house where someone's laughing, and then she runs back to Jim and Dill as fast as she can. And that's how the chapter ends.